subsecretarios generales de Naciones Unidas, Fabrizio Hochschild y Maimouna Sharif, con quien ya hemos tenido ocasión de coincidir. Despedimos en nombre de la Organización Mundial de Ciudades y Gobiernos Locales Unidos y de la Global Task Force que transmitan nuestro agradecimiento al secretario general de Naciones Unidas por habernos comisionado un informe con la visión del mundo local para contribuir a esta conmemoración del 75 aniversario de la organización. En este informe hemos expuesto el mundo que los gobiernos locales y regionales imaginamos para 2045 y también el multilateralismo inclusivo y en red que debería existir en el futuro. En concreto, al subsecretario Hochschild quisiera dirigir unas palabras, y es que habiendo seguido los debates de la Asamblea General, las ciudades y regiones del mundo estamos convencidas hoy más que nunca que nuestros retos necesitan respuestas globales y absolutamente coordinadas. Necesitamos más multilateralismo y queremos que cuenten con nosotras las ciudades para construirlo. Como usted sabe, buscamos un multilateralismo renovado con un lugar para los gobiernos locales y regionales en la mesa de decisión. Un multilateralismo que comprenda el mundo como uno solo y cuyo futuro se construya desde las aspiraciones de las comunidades, de las personas. Por ello, celebramos la visión de futuro que está mostrando el secretario general y el llamado que hizo el mismo secretario general durante la Asamblea General a incluirnos a las ciudades en el sistema multilateral. Creemos que dicho llamado desde el Pleno de la Asamblea fue un reconocimiento a las ciudades, a los gobiernos locales y regionales y a sus asociaciones. Y es en este sentido, como colectivo de ciudades y regiones, que tenemos el firme objetivo de conseguir el estatus de observador ante la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas. Este estatus de observador reconocería nuestro carácter gubernamental. Estamos listas y dispuestas para apoyar a Naciones Unidas en la elaboración de un programa mundial inclusivo y sostenible, aportando la perspectiva que nos ofrece la proximidad a la ciudadanía. En el futuro, las ciudades debemos estar más presentes para garantizar el enlace entre las comunidades y lo global, para configurar un sistema multilateral que esté en diálogo permanente con la sociedad civil. Y de esta forma conseguir muchos objetivos a la vez, entre ellos que se prioricen las necesidades de las personas por encima de cualquier otro interés, que se defiendan los derechos fundamentales de las personas protegiendo los servicios públicos, muchos de los cuales se prestan desde nuestras ciudades, que se entienda la emergencia climática como una prioridad ineludible que necesita acciones valientes, urgentes y verdaderamente transformadoras. Permítame también destacar 3 puntos de este informe global que muy acertadamente convocaron desde Naciones Unidas y en el que han participado más de 1 millón de personas encuestadas. En primer lugar, en medio de la crisis actual, en todas partes del mundo, existe coincidencia en señalar una prioridad: el acceso a los servicios públicos. La especulación con los derechos básicos amenaza hoy la vida de las ciudades y pone en jaque, en peligro, nuestro futuro y el de las próximas generaciones. En segundo lugar, nuestro movimiento lo ha dicho siempre y celebra que la siguiente prioridad identificada sea una mayor solidaridad internacional y un mayor apoyo a los lugares más afectados por la pandemia. Importante incluir la lucha contra la pobreza, las desigualdades y el fomento del empleo. Como dije antes, cuenten con nosotras para trabajar en este objetivo. Y en tercer lugar, es evidente que la salud pública vuelve a ser una prioridad clave para el mundo entero. El acceso por parte de todos a los servicios sanitarios es un derecho innegociable y es relevante ver que en el informe de Naciones Unidas se muestran optimistas en que el acceso a la salud mejorará en los próximos años, señalando un avance en el acceso a los servicios públicos y el acceso igualitario. Para hacer posibles estos 3 puntos destacados del informe, es imprescindible establecer un debate democrático entre los diferentes niveles de gobierno para fijar los mismos objetivos básicos globales, con las prioridades ya expuestas, y conseguir que nuestras políticas y recursos siempre sumen y nos hagan avanzar hacia un futuro mejor. Lo decimos siempre, en CGLU somos conscientes de que nuestras ciudades y nuestros territorios ya nunca serán los mismos, que el mundo está cambiando. Esta crisis desafía mucho de nuestros modelos y pone en evidencia las numerosas deficiencias de las que ya éramos conscientes. En la antigua normalidad habían muchas cosas que no funcionaban bien, con una economía que genera desigualdades, precariedad, que genera machismo, que perpetúa machismo, que pone en peligro la vida en el planeta. Por lo tanto, no queremos volver a esa normalidad, sino aprovechar este contexto de crisis profunda para acelerar esos cambios, esas transformaciones que todos sabíamos que debíamos acometer. Es nuestra responsabilidad, por lo tanto, y también la de Naciones Unidas, aprovechar este momento de reflexión para avanzar de manera concreta hacia este horizonte, con una gobernanza global más compartida y más sólida que ponga por fin las personas en el centro. Y termino con esta breve reflexión. Está realmente en juego la propia democracia y la supervivencia de la humanidad. Tenemos una máxima responsabilidad con el presente y con las generaciones futuras. Y además vemos cómo en este contexto de crisis, de momento de incertidumbre, donde hay muchos miedos legítimos por parte de la población de todas las regiones, hay quienes aprovechan esos miedos para hacer crecer los discursos de odio en todas las regiones del mundo. Frente a esos discursos de odio, para convertir los miedos en esperanzas, cuenten con las ciudades para poner la vida en el centro, para poner en el centro la empatía, los cuidados, para construir sociedades abiertas, inclusivas y orgullosamente diversas. Cuenten de verdad con las ciudades porque no les fallaremos. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, enviada especial. Muchas gracias, alcaldesa, por ese mensaje realista, pero yo creo que también esperanzador, ¿no? Esa agenda de la felicidad que en una sesión anterior también comentaba el alcalde de Montevideo. The Under Secretary General is going to intervene now as in general remarks, but then we will have the opportunity to hear from him about the different segments of this meeting, because we have tried to make both our reports talk to each other. So on the one hand, the report that the United Nations has produced on behalf of all the stakeholders, and our own visioning report as local governments. So Undersecretary General, I would say, Fabrizio, the floor is yours for opening remarks.
Muchas gracias, Emilia. Es un gran placer estar con ustedes y también quiero agradecer a la alcaldesa Colau por sus palabras tan inspiradoras. United Cities and local government have been a tremendous support throughout this anniversary year for us. When I last spoke to you in May, I noted that urban areas have been at the sharp end of this pandemic and at the forefront of care for people, for communities, and also beyond care for innovation solutions and leadership in these extraordinary circumstances. I listen with great interest to your own discussions on next generation multilateralism. And we brought to the attention of heads of state your contribution in this area. Since I last spoke, as Alcaldesa Colau indicated, we listened to well over 1 million people from rural and urban areas from all member states on their priorities for recovering from the pandemic, on building back better, their expectations of international cooperation. We also had about 1,000 UN 75 dialogues in person and online. And then we got independent data from 2 major survey companies, including AI analysis, sentiment analysis in 70 countries. So we have a huge amount of data, which we've synthesized in the report we produced for the 21st of September which synthesizes our findings. And we could not have done this without you. So my first word is a word of thanks. And we also featured in our report, through the contribution of Beri Verbanovic and others at this event, some of your findings. So I just want to start by thanking you for that support. And we have integrated your findings in what we shared with member states.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary General. We are going now to the first segment where we are going to have immediate priorities for recovery from the pandemic, and I will invite you to react back on this after we hear some of the panelists. Let me start with UN Habitat Executive Director Maimouna Mohd-Sharif, and let me remind you also that we have representation from over 23 different organizations gathered here today, among them CLGF, ICLEI, Regions 4, Metropolis, UCSI, Orufogar, C40, IER, the Global Parliament of Mayors, and all of the regional organizations that are also UCLG family in the different continents. So it's just a reminder that it's a broad family represented here, and that the geographical balance of the panels might not seem obvious, but they are related to organization representation. So Maimouna, you know us also, I don't need to explain that to you. But I wanted to recall this. Executive Director, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, my friend Amelia and Mayor Salah and my colleague, the Fabrizio. Thank you very much, Excellencies, Honorable Mayors, Honorable Ministers, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Yes, 2 weeks have passed since the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, which marked an important step in shaping the future of our world and of the UN. Member states recommitted to fostering multilateralism, to fight inequalities and to leave no one behind, to protect the planet, promote peace, gender equality and youth employment through reinvigorated financing and partnership, while recognizing the central role of the United Nations. The pandemic and its consequences was surely at the center of the debate, with member states reaffirming their engagement to share experiences for the world to be never again caught off guard. The key findings identified by the UN 75 reports put local action, local and regional governments on the spot for the future of humanity. The key areas of work for the future are linked to improve access to basic services, as what our mayor mentioned just now, such as healthcare and education, and to providing increased support to the places hit the hardest by the pandemic, including boosting economic recovery and employment, while remaining the focus on fighting climate changes. All these priorities falls into the mandate and the work of the local and regional governments, which are not only proof essential in fighting the immediate consequences of the crisis, but are the key to ensure a sustainable and inclusive recovery for all. In this context, dear friend, I must say a big thank you for the extraordinary effort you have accomplished in conducting global and regional consultations to bring the voice of local and regional governments to the world stage. Your work, commitment, and partnership are priceless, and we welcome the acknowledgement of the importance of cities and local governments by the General Assembly. The central role of cities and local government in determining the success of our collective recovery effort was already highlighted by the UN Secretary General's policy paper on COVID-19 in an urban world, for which UN Habitat was the pen holder. The policy brief analyzes the inequalities that are so deeply rooted in our societies and discusses how cities can manage the pandemic and emerge as the hub of creativity, resilience, and innovation. It's called for conscious policy choices and priority action, particularly with respect to 3 key areas. Number 1, tackling inequalities and development deficit to reduce urban vulnerabilities and strengthen human rights. Number 2, strengthening the capacities of local government, human, technical, financial, and enhanced multi-level coordination. And number 3, pursuing a resilient, inclusive, and gender equal and green economic recovery. Dear partners, we are running out of time. We are just 10 years away from the 2030 threshold, and the effects of the pandemic have considered slow down our progress, and we have to act now, and we need to do it together. As the mandated UN agencies to work with the local and regional governments, UN Habitat has always been and will always be on your side. In the context of the future of multilateralism, we need to further strengthen our partnership, and we can do it based on 3 principles. The first principle is on partnership, solidarity, and co-creation. The response to the pandemic demonstrated that none of us alone can go far. Partnership and solidarity are at the basis upon which laying the foundation of our future work. The local and regional government's constituency is uniquely positioned to harness inclusion and co-creation to achieve community-driven multilateralism. That is why I am happy that co-creation is also the common thread of the Cities #CitiesAreListening series that we jointly support with UCLG and Metropolis. Second principle is the multi-level governance. We have already spent too many words to raise awareness on the importance of local and regional governments. We have been doing so for the past 15 years already, and it is the moment to step up our game. We need to further engage member states and to make sure that systematic mechanisms for communication and coordination are created, and that the local level is put at the center of national development policies. The third principle is on SDG and the COVID-19. Implementing the SDGs and ensuring a sustainable recovery are 2 faces of the same coin. We need to continue our advocacy effort towards national and local leaders to ensure the SDGs are taken into account in the recovery effort everywhere. We need to keep producing knowledge material to guide cities and local government in all phases of the localization of the SDGs. UN Habitat encourages local government partners to work on encouraging cities and communities to carry out voluntary local reviews. It is not just about data gathering, but to form the basis for informed decision-making. It is also help local communities understand what the SDGs are, why they are important, and what action could be taken to localize them. In other words, we need to recognize the SDG, and it has to be part of our life, and how we live it will determine if we can achieve the SDGs in this decade of action. Action begins with all of us. Thank you very much, Emilia. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. I am certain that we identify with your words, and we are looking forward to also this first reporting year on the new urban agenda, which for us is an important building block of that 2030 agenda and the SDGs. Without the new urban agenda, we will not get far in localization, and that is the aim. So thank you very much for that, and let me go now to a representative of another sphere of government, Arratsaldeon, Lehendakari. Welcome, President of the Basque Country.
Arratsaldeon, buenas tardes, egunon, buenos días, good afternoon, good morning from Euskadi Basque Country. Agradezco el espacio que nos ofrecen en este acto de Naciones Unidas para intervenir en representación del Gobierno vasco y de la red Regions for que presido. La reflexión del futuro que queremos, las Naciones Unidas que necesitamos, con motivo del 75 aniversario de su fundación, se produce en un escenario marcado por la pandemia del coronavirus. Esto es el escenario más global que hemos conocido en nuestra vida. La COVID-19 evidencia la interdependencia del mundo en que vivimos. Esta es una prioridad que nos acerca y compromete por igual a todas las naciones del mundo. La respuesta a este desafío y las transformaciones que va a originar son una oportunidad para la gobernanza colaborativa con visión global que representa Naciones Unidas. Euskadi Basque Country y la red Regions for compartimos este modelo. La respuesta presente y futura a la pandemia, unida a los retos de la emergencia climática, los movimientos migratorios, la lucha contra la pobreza o la promoción de un desarrollo sostenible, son oportunidades para una nueva concepción de la gobernanza. Una oportunidad para recuperar los valores fundacionales de Naciones Unidas y para incorporar a su red de gobernanza global todo el potencial institucional con que contamos. Este ha sido el objetivo de nuestra aportación, contribuir a construir la nueva visión de Naciones Unidas desde la base, abriendo la participación a los gobiernos que nos encontramos más próximos a las demandas, necesidades y deseos de las personas. Gobiernos regionales, subestatales o que representamos a realidades nacionales y queremos participar directamente en esta nueva etapa de Naciones Unidas. Hoy lo hacemos subrayando las prioridades inmediatas que nos unen para responder a la pandemia de la COVID-19. Nuestra aportación se integra en la Agenda 2030 y los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible que compartimos. Apostamos por una respuesta de cercanía y proximidad, esto es, una apuesta por la dimensión humana. Desde esta visión de cercanía, compartimos las lecciones aprendidas y las prioridades en la respuesta inmediata a la pandemia. 1. Compromiso sanitario con la atención primaria y la realización de test de diagnóstico, rastreo de contactos y contagios. 2. Compromiso colectivo para establecer burbujas sociales, educativas y laborales. 3. Compromiso personal con el uso de las mascarillas, la higiene y la distancia interpersonal. 4. Compromiso público para limitar la movilidad y las relaciones interpersonales. Esta visión de cercanía nos permite destacar también las lecciones aprendidas para recuperarnos de esta pandemia. Inversión pública en los servicios esenciales de salud, educación, protección social y atención sociosanitaria. Planes de choque para mantener la actividad y el empleo en los sectores más afectados. Industria, comercio, hostelería, turismo o cultura, transformación productiva primando la economía circular, el kilómetro cero y el consumo de proximidad, inversión en innovación, investigación y desarrollo, especialmente en el sector de la salud y la calidad de vida. El Gobierno vasco y la red Regions for apostamos por implicar a nuestras comunidades en una respuesta a la pandemia asentada sobre el rigor y la corresponsabilidad. Ofrecemos todo nuestro apoyo, compromiso y voluntad política para colaborar con Naciones Unidas y contribuir a transformar el mundo en el horizonte 2045. Las lecciones aprendidas en respuesta a la pandemia y la oportunidad de compartir las prioridades que planteamos pueden representar un punto de inflexión de cara al futuro de Naciones Unidas. Nuestra propuesta es transformar desde la base, desde dentro. Desde nuestros gobiernos aportamos la experiencia de cercanía a las personas y planteamos participar en el nuevo modelo de gobernanza colaborativa de Naciones Unidas que necesitamos para construir juntos el futuro que queremos. Eskerrik asko, muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Eskerrik asko también, Lehendakari. Muchísimas gracias por estas palabras y por ese compromiso también expresado, ¿no? con las agendas globales que tienen un lazo tan estrecho con la proximidad y con las agendas locales y territoriales. Muchas gracias por el compromiso de Regions 4 y del País Vasco. And now I am going to give the floor to one of those partners that local governments need. And I would like the Secretary General of Habitat International Coalition to give us in a couple of minutes her perception of this visioning report that we have done and the role that local governments can play in the aftermath or in our new pathway. I don't know whether we should talk about aftermath anymore. It doesn't seem to be over. So Yolande, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Emilia, and thank you, UCLG, as well for having us. HIC would firstly like to say that we very much value building bridges between local and regional governments and civil society. HIC is 100% behind the importance of rethinking multilateralism together. As a coalition, HIC has been working for more than 40 years in over 5 continents, bringing together more than 400 organizations working for habitat rights. And this work has won HIC the consultative status at the United Nations. Even with this consultative status, avenues for engagement have been limited. And so we need to find more agile, regular, and direct forms of engagement with civil society. In reviewing the reports, HIC noted that habitat and housing rights do not feature in the short and long-term priorities. In terms of short-term priorities, basic services were highlighted, particularly health, water, sanitation, education, but habitat does not feature. HIC would like to highlight that habitat and the protection of housing rights is crucial in the chapter in linking short and long-term priorities. In terms of long-term priorities, the highlighting of the climate crisis was a key issue. The question for HIC is, how do we want to think of the climate crisis if we do not consider habitat, or what role does habitat play in that larger context? And so HIC would like to suggest focusing on the intersection between climate justice and housing rights. The link for civil society organizations to work with the United Nations has become thinner over time. And so HIC would like to say that this consultation cannot be a once-off engagement. And so in closing, together with the necessity to consider habitat, HIC would like to emphasize the need for more channels and democratizing channels, particularly for civil society to work with United Nations systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. I think we all agree that that the multilateral system needs renewal, and I guess what our constituency is saying also is that we need to create more space for deliberation, but also renewed spaces for decision making for different actors. So hopefully our constituency hopes to open up that type of dialogue with organized civil society, so that we can together complement the important role that the United Nations system is playing, because we are all multilateralists in this meeting. So thank you very much for those words, and on housing, we are taking good note. I think it is indispensable to put it high on the agenda. So certainly our constituency will do its best. I think I speak on behalf of all the organizations here. It's time now for a mayor, Mayor Wim Dries, who has a mayor of Genk in Belgium. He embraced SDGs very early on and is a true champion on localization. Wim Dries is here on behalf of CEMR, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emilia, and also ladies and gentlemen, from myself also a very good day. I think that the current pandemic has again stressed the relevance at the Agenda 2030 for the sustainable development. How can we move forward? How can we sustainably develop our local territories while at the same time claiming our seat at the international decision-making table? Ladies and gentlemen, the answer always boils down to the undeniable importance of SDG 17 on partnership. First of all, our demand for inclusion in national and international decision-making implies that we fulfill our own responsibilities regarding local participation. Citizens and local partners already develop creative and decisive solutions to various challenges. By example, in Flanders, we have citizen co-ops for renewable energy, citizen waste pickers, or people opening up their gardens to homebound families during the COVID-19 lockdown, but also a lot of volunteers helping during the lockdown with other people to support them. Many cities, by example, in Flanders have their own relance plan in combination with regional and national plans. In Genk, by example, my own city, we facilitated local shops and cafes, restaurants to become more resilient in, by example, online e-commerce, and we find a good working together. We should bolster and support these initiatives. In doing this, we have to pay special attention to the most vulnerable groups and minority groups who often stay under the radar when it comes to participation and co-creation. Local governments, ladies and gentlemen, also work on sustainable development and recovery from the COVID-19 crisis through a city-to-city cooperation, supported by their associations and local government networks. These city-to-city cooperation contributes to enhance delivery of basic services in a transparent and democratic manner. Therefore, national governments and international institutions need to appreciate and support these partnerships in the long term and include them in the COVID-19 recovery process, as we heard by many speakers before this. Because cities and governments level closest to the cities, we need a renewed United Nations in which local governments are actively engaged. And I'm very pleased to hear that Mr. Hochschild, but also Ms. Sharif put this forward. Who better to speak for local governments and their constituencies than local governments themselves? They comprehend best the immediate and long-term local challenges and are therefore in the pole position to provide insights into solutions and what is needed to implement these solutions. The UN can in turn support local governments in tackling challenges such as climate change. At the HLPF in 2019, I raised the idea of green helmets, maybe something like the blue helmets, but then people that work really in the cities from the UN to help them do projects, by example, in climate change and in tackling the problems that there are locally. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make a plea for us as local political representatives to take the lead. We have to think critically about our local policies and how they affect our peers and partners across the globe. Safeguarding policy coherence in both immediate and short-term recovery strategies will be crucial. Agenda 2030 provides an ideal compass. By taking the lead in sustainable transition, we can also reinforce our demand for a seat at the international decision-making table. Let me conclude by referring to Mr. John Lennon, and I did that this week already in another meeting. The beginning of the 70s, he had a song of protest, and it was called Power to the People. Allow me to paraphrase his political demand into one adapted to our context in saying power to the cities. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. I think it cannot be said neither clearer nor louder. Thank you for those inputs, for the plea and for the commitment shown as well. And we're going back to regional government's representative, Mr. Magnus Bertsson, Vice President of the region Västra Gotland and Regional Minister for Environment, President of the Assembly of European Regions. Magnus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the Global Task Force of local and regional governments for making this event possible. On the 21st of September, world leaders of the United Nations General Assembly gathered virtually to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the UN. Today, the constituency of local and regional authorities meet, not only to celebrate, but also to share the future UN we envision for 2045. The year 2020 will forever mark a turning point for our societies. The world has been put to a test during the past months, a test which none of us was prepared for. Local and regional governments found themselves at the forefront of this health crisis, having to coordinate a quick response to protect their citizens and their economy from the COVID-19 pandemic. However, half of the world's population do not have benefit from any form of social protection, nor have access to essential health services. Food insecurity has been on the rise since 2015, and due to the pandemic, the figures have been worsened. The health systems have been devastated amid the pandemic, which has revealed the insufficient healthcare facilities and medical supplies. Children's education has been put at risk by closing of the schools during the global lockdown, affecting over 90% of the student population. Remote education has worked well in some countries, whereas in others, it has only widened the digital gap. Billions of people throughout the world still lack access to safely managed water and sanitation services, which are critical to preventing the spread of the virus. These are only a few examples that shows how the COVID-19 has exposed and widened the profound inequalities that exist in the year 2020 among our regions and countries. We have just entered the decade of delivery, and we cannot let the global pandemic undermine our joint efforts and achievements reached so far. It is our shared responsibility that we together, local and regional government, must ensure that no one is left behind. And we should do it hand in hand, unifying forces and coordinating responses and actions. Local and regional governments should take responsibility for the provision of basic services to our citizens in order to improve their living standards and the quality of life. And no one is better placed than us to understand and respond to the needs of the most vulnerable ones. It is necessary to establish a strong partnership and involve all stakeholders in order to protect human rights and promote social, territorial, and economic cohesion to those furthest left behind. Today, I and the Assembly of European Regions call all member states, regions, and cities and civil society organizations to coordinate efforts in order to establish a fair future for all, with resilient regions and cities to guarantee the well-being of our citizens. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, President Bertsson, for these remarks. And I'm going back now to the Undersecretary General to give some comments on this segment. Well, housing, food systems, but above all, service provision, Fabrizio, have been put as very critical aspects of the recovery. You even got a proposal for green helmets. Some remarks from your side on how we are looking at this?
Thank you very much. I've listened very attentively and taken a lot of notes. This is extremely helpful. I think what I've been hearing coincides very well with what was expressed through our different collection of data from citizens across the world. And it focused very much on the provision of basic services, on solidarity, and on rebuilding back better. As the Alcaldesa Colau stated, I mean, people want to see change. They want to see a reinvigorated and a new form of multilateralism that brings in much better the voices of we the peoples, and in an ongoing process, as Hick emphasized. I think that there was also a demand for greater solidarity and a more inclusive economy. I think what is very striking for me about the findings that have been reinforced by the interventions now is just how united people are across the world in their basic demands. We live in a time, what some people call fabricated polarization, where social media accentuates differences, accentuates friction, undermines social cohesion. But when you go back to citizens everywhere, their demands are remarkably similar. Their fears, their hopes are remarkably similar. And I think as mayors, you probably have a much more real sense of that than politicians who may be further removed from the immediate concerns of citizens. And I think for that reason also, the call for cities to be more central in international governance is tremendously important, and one which I know the Secretary General will pursue in follow-up to our UN 75 initiative.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for those inputs. We are going now to the long-term priorities, and we already have a request from our colleagues from HIC to put habitat and housing in those long-term priorities. I am certain that Executive Director of UN Habitat will very much agree with that, and I think it's part and parcel of looking at the new urban agenda as part of the SDGs as well, as an important building block. We have very general concerns around the climate crisis, our relationship with nature, and this has clearly been identified in both the UN report and our visioning report. Allow me to start with the chairperson of the Commonwealth Local Governments Forum, Reverend Mpo Mwakagomo, who is here with us today. The floor is yours, Reverend. You are with us, right?
Thank you very much, Amelia. Your Excellencies, I'm the Secretary General, the Director of UN Habitat, mayors, colleagues, good afternoon or good day. It is a pleasure to be representing the Commonwealth Local Government Forum at this important discussion. At a moment of change in the world, we are coming together collectively as a global community of local governments to share our vision for the future we want. And this future we want, and more importantly, the United Nations that we need to make that future a reality. We look forward to continuing to enhance multilateralism across our sector and to the strengthening of our engagement with the United Nations. As local and regional governments, we are on the forefront in the line of delivery, as we are the part of government closest to the people. Therefore, our ability to interact and our ability to be able to represent our constituency and our voice to be heard gives legitimacy to the people, the citizens we represent. And above all, we live with these, we know them, we are the ear, and we are right at the grassroots. Therefore, global targets to address climate change, urbanization, or poverty reduction and development becomes a reality because we live it and we walk it, and are achieved in our local communities and territories. This has been said before and amplified, that was reinforced by the recent COVID-19 pandemic, where we have seen local and regional governments on the forefront of managing and responding to this crisis. As we look to the future, it is clear to us that we must integrate local democracy at the core of peaceful societies to ensure a strong voice for local populace in guiding local development and having a say in the decisions that affect their lives and their livelihoods. Our members are clear that decentralization should be the new normal that we must invest in and support local development. We want to see a territorial approach, an emphasized territorial approach to development, where our society, our cities, towns, and surrounding rural areas are planned and developed as one interdependent whole that is responsive to the local needs and priorities and capitalize on local assets and resources. I remember the terms we used earlier on in our discussions earlier, proximity production, proximity consumption, a circular interrelated green recovery. To achieve this, we need to continue to focus on ensuring that our local and regional governments are participatory, accountable, and transparent. On our part, this is very important as local and regional governments. And that they are inclusive, free of corruption, and represent all parts of the community they serve. More so, resources now will be more stretched than ever before. Therefore, we need to eliminate any leaks that may be coming so that we can be able to respond. SDG 16 calls us to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Therefore, local government is at the heart of this. We are working to build strong, resilient, and robust local governments. And COVID-19 has taught us that we need to build robust, resilient local governments. Local institutions and principles of governance to achieve priorities. Going forward, a focus on delivery will be key. My colleagues will focus on other areas as we speak today, but I want to emphasize that local economic development and supporting local livelihoods will be central to our recovery from COVID-19 and to supporting the green recovery that we are committed to seeing. Local government has a critical role in enabling effective local economic development, in strengthening the value chains that enable trade and good governance, and strong institutions and empowered local leadership will enable this. We need strong local leadership. Our world stands at the brink. We need to grasp this opportunity to build a better and more sustainable world by building from the bottom up. Together with our communities and local leaders to create a fairer, more inclusive, more sustainable, and more resilient cities and local governments. There has been huge value in us as local and regional government constituency, working together as global task force to ensure local government's voice is heard. And Amelia and our colleagues at UCLG and across the other parts of the global task force, I want to congratulate you for this. It has been challenging, difficult, but we have been working together and we need to up this. And the Undersecretary General has talked about solidarity. This is the time for that solidarity. We have consulted with our constituency extensively. We want to deepen our partnership with the United Nations and see a more inclusive UN in the future. Our objectives and purpose are closely aligned. We also want the United Nations to continue to work to uphold the principles of democracy and good governance on which our effectiveness depends as a world. My colleagues, good luck to all of us in this work. And to do this, we are stronger together. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Reverend. And thank you also for bringing local democracy, effective transparency institutions to our longer term objectives. Indeed, if we don't have that, we will not go very far. And it needs to be part and parcel of that new architecture of governance that we are pushing for. Allow me now to go to the Vice Mayor of Ufa, Ms. Alima Suleymanova. She is with us. Yes, I see you, Alina. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Добрый вечер, коллеги. У нас уже вечер. Приветствую всех участников форума и поздравляю с 75-летним юбилеем ООН. Меня зовут Алина Сулейманова, я являюсь заместителем мэра города Уфы. К сожалению, мэр нашего города Ульфат Мустафин не может принять участие в сегодняшнем форуме по объективным причинам. Поэтому выступать от администрации Уфы и Евразийского отделения Всемирной организации «Объединенные города и местные власти» с докладом буду я. Позвольте выразить благодарность президенту Всемирной организации ОГМВ Мохаммаду Бодра, президенту Евразийского отделения ОГМВ Ильсуру Раисовичу Медшину за возможность подключиться к обсуждению модернизации глобального управления и повышения вовлеченности местных и региональных властей в этот процесс. Несколько слов о нашем городе и республике. Башкортостан славится богатой и красивой природой с разнообразным ландшафтом.
Vice Mayor, just a minute, because I was listening to interpretation and then I lost it, and I don't know if this is a general thing. So give us a second so that we try and solve it. I was hearing and then it seems to be gone. Colleagues, UCLG team,
Okay.
Can you give me a sign and see whether we can do anything about it?
We will look into it, but we might need a few minutes. So if you can go to another.
Okay, so Vice Mayor, please be patient with us. Apologies for this technical glitch. We will go to a next speaker and we will come back to you. So allow me to go to the Mayor of Sala in Sweden, Ms. Carola Gunnarsson, also UCLG Vice President for Europe. Carola, are you ready?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, Mr. Hochschild, Madame Mahmoud Sharif, and dear colleagues, it's a great pleasure for me to see that you are so engaged and attentive to the needs of the local and regional governments throughout this UN 75 consultation. I would like to highlight 3 main points regarding long-term priorities for the future we want. The first one is about the key findings in the UN report. There is a real call for environmental protection, but also access to basic services, including healthcare and education. These objectives can only be achieved with the support of the local and regional governments. As the closest level to the citizens, we are the ones able to make real change in daily life for the people and to provide all the basic services needed. We are also most appropriate actor to implement and localize on the long-term international agendas. This leads me to my second remark. As local and regional governments, where should we stand and with which status? Should we be a part of the United Nations with a dedicated seat? It would allow us to speak and to express our views to all members of United Nations and to influence international legislation, especially regarding urgent measures that need to be taken to overcome challenges such as COVID-19. But however, it also needs to happen for long-term strategies. If we understand that we will not have the same rights and influence as the member states, we must be able to express our views and see our opinions taken into account by the United Nations legislative bodies. What about having UCLG recognized with observer status at the UN? Our world organization is the most effective and appropriate body to represent us and to have a seat at the table. Finally, my third point is about gender equality. We have to acknowledge that we still have a long way to go before having real and effective gender equality. Women represent more than half of humanity, but they are barely represented in politics. It will take 95 years to close the gap in political empowerment. That is too long. CMR recently released a study about women's representation at all levels of governance across 41 European countries. Currently, in Europe, only 15% of the mayors and 29% of the councillors are women. Let's be realistic. This is not what I call an equal share. I would like to call for lobbying in favor of binding rules, even if they be temporary measures, obliging to have an equal representation of men and women in their political leadership. Equality between women and men can be reached by 2050 with the empowerment of all girls and women all around the world. I know that there is still a long way to go, but together, all of us, men and women, alongside each other, we can do it. Together, let's make our world equal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Equality is certainly a very important long-term objective for our constituency and for the world, and also some concrete proposals of how that seat of the table could take place. We also have inputs from the Mayor of Bonn on this that we will be hearing later on with a very strong message and very clear proposals. So thank you for that. Let us go now to see whether the Vice Mayor, whether Alina, she has always been ready, but interpretation was not ready. So let us see, Alina, whether it works now. I'm going back to you. Now we can, let me see. Go ahead, let us see. Hold on a second, Vice Mayor.
Подождите немножко, вице-мэр. Мы вас не слышим.
Can you?
There seems to be a problem with the microphone of the interpreter. Let's try it again, because I have with the other device.
Okay, so can she speak now? Juan Carlos, please go ahead. No, it is not working. I am so sorry, Vice Mayor. I am going to carry on, and then
Госпожа вице-мэр, я вас не слышу.
I am going to carry on and then bring you back. Thank you.
Мы продолжим и потом вернемся.
Thank you for this. Thank you for these words. I am going to go back to the Undersecretary General to see whether he acknowledges or recognizes some of these longer-term objectives, and then I would introduce the very last panel. But any feedback, Fabrizio, on these long-term objectives?
Yes, I mean, I think there was mention of what came out of our work, the overwhelming concern with the climate crisis and the destruction of our natural environment. And of course, cities are at the heart of this, because to the extent there is climate displacement, which we're already seeing in some parts of the world, that displacement tends to happen from rural areas to cities. Some low-lying cities will be particularly vulnerable to oceans rising. And then cities have to be at the forefront of climate protection, because of course, the majority of CO2 emissions come from cities. And we've seen many cities take up this challenge and advocate for better green building, green transport systems. And I think that's particularly important, the leadership of cities in that regard. There were also calls in our survey for greater respect for human rights and for better tackling of inequalities. I think inequalities really came to the fore. There were also calls, there hasn't been mention of that, for dealing better with corruption. I think there's a particular concern that has also been heightened now through the budgetary constraints of the siphoning off of funds through corruption from public services, which is particularly vital. And I would say that the member states have heeded these calls. I mean, in the UN 75 declaration, they've put climate change at the forefront. And there was also a reference for the need for greater gender equality. And that is also something that figures among the commitments made by member states, is a commitment to accelerate work towards greater gender equality. Now, of course, the declaration itself is no guarantee of anything, but it is a document to hold leaders accountable for what they've committed to. But thank you. This has been very enriching for me.
Thank you very much. So let us go now to the type of international cooperation and UN we need. Of course, all of these topics are very interrelated. We all are pleading for global solutions for these challenges that we are facing. The report of our constituency is very clear about this. It's not about substituting the roles that national governments need to play, but bringing new players to the table with differentiated roles. This is what this segment is going to be about, although there have been speakers that brought in this aspect of SDG 17, which is very critical. So I'm going now to the mayor of San Jose de Costa Rica, Johnny Araya. Please, Johnny, you have the floor.
Señor Vicesecretario General de las Naciones Unidas, señora directora de ONU Habitat, estimados alcaldes y presidentes de regiones, queridos colegas de Global Task Force, amigas y amigos. Es motivo de celebración la sesión de hoy. Celebramos los 75 años de las Naciones Unidas, pero celebramos también los hallazgos del informe sobre la consulta mundial comisionado por el secretario general Antonio Guterres, y la ciudadanía ha hablado. Coincidimos plenamente con la prioridad inmediata señalada por la mayoría, por la inmensa mayoría de los encuestados. Tenemos que mejorar el acceso a los servicios básicos. Esta pandemia ha evidenciado la importancia de las ciudades en el mantenimiento y funcionamiento de los servicios públicos. Las ciudades hemos desarrollado nuevos servicios y adaptado algunos para apoyar las medidas sanitarias al tiempo que se garantiza la protección de los funcionarios locales que los facilitan. Ahora más que nunca, es imperativo garantizar a la ciudadanía la igualdad de acceso a los recursos, a los servicios públicos, así como el acceso a un empleo digno. Celebro que las conclusiones del informe de los 75 años se destaque también de manera abrumadora que las Naciones Unidas deben ser más inclusivas y trabajen por un multilateralismo en red, incluyendo a las mujeres, como ya se ha dicho, a los jóvenes, los grupos vulnerables, las ciudades y las autoridades locales, por supuesto. Las Naciones Unidas pueden ser un ejemplo y reflejo de la columna vertebral de las democracias. Los resultados de esta consulta mundial constituyen, sin duda alguna, un insumo de vital importancia para redimensionar el rol de las Naciones Unidas. Desde las ciudades les decimos que el diálogo entre todas las esferas de gobierno y una descentralización efectiva deben llevarse a cabo para asegurar que los deseos y necesidades de la ciudadanía estén presentes en todas las instancias de gobierno. La solidaridad se ha convertido en un faro de seguridad y debe guiar las transformaciones que necesitamos. Los gobiernos locales y regionales han demostrado su capacidad para actuar como promotores y guardianes de esta solidaridad, tanto a nivel nacional como internacional. Y el tema cobra particular relevancia cuando todos los indicadores nos marcan un crecimiento exponencial de la desigualdad en el mundo. Tenemos que pensar pensar seriamente cómo vamos a revertir esta peligrosa tendencia. Somos, estimados colegas, la esfera de gobierno que mejor puede catalizar las aspiraciones de nuestras comunidades. Solo si somos parte de la mesa de toma de decisiones, seremos capaces de conseguir que la creatividad de nuestras comunidades forme parte de las soluciones que requiere nuestra sociedad. Estamos convencidos que de cara a los próximos 25 años necesitaremos un sólido sistema de gobernanza multilateral y una nueva cultura colaborativa para la gobernanza. Y solo así llegaremos a los 100 años de las Naciones Unidas con el mundo que queremos, con el mundo que soñamos. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, alcalde. Gracias por traer la voz latinoamericana a esta reunión. Muchas gracias a FLACMA, a Mercociudades, que también están con nosotros, ambas organizaciones, por acompañarnos en este trabajo que hoy celebramos como un paso más. Es un final, pero un principio también. Gracias por este llamado al multilateralismo y a esa gobierno en paternariado, ¿no? Multinivel. Muchísimas gracias. Allow me to go now to Barry Brabanovich, Mayor of Kitchener. I think you are with us, Barry. I cannot see you right now. But
I am, Steve.
Very good. So please, you've got the floor. The Undersecretary General was recognizing at the beginning your inputs in a special session and a high-level dialogue where you presented the report from our side. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Amelia, and greetings from Kitchener, Canada, on the western edge of the Toronto-Waterloo Innovation Corridor. Let me begin by thanking the Global Task Force for organizing this forum today to allow us to reflect on the importance of local governments in the celebration of UN 75. More importantly, thank you for providing this forum where we can focus on the need for partnerships and solidarity as we respond to the immediate priorities for recovery from the pandemic, plan for the long-term priorities for the future we want, and ensure international cooperation becomes the focus of how we do business going forward and build towards the UN we all need. Colleagues, cities have been at the forefront of civilization for thousands of years, but at no time has the importance of cities been more evident than in 2020, as we have tirelessly worked to save lives in our collective fight against the COVID-19 global pandemic. From our critical role in providing essential services and services such as water and public health to effective emergency management and housing for the homeless, countless lives have been saved because of the strong leadership demonstrated by local governments. As we reflect on the successes that have been achieved during the past 7 months, we would be remiss if we didn't recognize the important role that international cooperation and solidarity has played to support each other during these challenging times. Our UCLG World Organization has been at the forefront of fostering this solidarity since the beginning of the pandemic through the live learning experiences beyond the immediate response to the outbreak that gathered over 250 local and regional leaders to share the value of basic services in the middle of the pandemic. Our upcoming Cities Are Listening experiences will take this one step further as a space for dialogue between stakeholders and the political leadership of our constituency to provide an ongoing dialogue to define our international advocacy. From a Canadian perspective and through the work of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and UCLG, and the multilateral engagement of Canadian cities like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and my own city, Kitchener, I envision 2020 and beyond to be built upon a new equitable partnership amongst all spheres of government, where we'll not only ensure basic human rights and protect local democracy, but where we will build back better on the foundations laid by the UN's global goals. More than ever, international cooperation will not only be essential to respond to the current pandemic, but will prove to be even more essential in the aftermath. It'll be critical to guarantee exchanges of knowledge and experiences through decentralized cooperation to build back better, stronger, and more inclusive after the pandemic. Local and regional governments and their associations must be the guardians of this international solidarity. A seat at the table for UCLG at the United Nations would play a key role in facilitating this collaboratively with the nations of the world. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, alcalde. Let us go now to a regional perspective again, and on behalf of Oru Forgar, the Organization of Regions, I would like to give the floor to Miquel Royo, Director of International Affairs at the Government of Catalonia. Miquel, the floor is yours.
Hi, Amelia. Thank you so much. I want to thank you very much for your work and that work of the Global Task Force. Mr. Undersecretary General of the United Nations, governors, presidents, members of local and regional governments. Allow me to present to you Orofogar's point of view on this important issue and focus especially on the COVID-19 pandemic, which has forced us to really learn how to imagine unusual and urgent crises in a short amount of time. These crises have laid bare to all the inequalities and gaps in access to the various public services, whether in terms of medical care, education, access to drinking water, new technologies. This has really prompted us to refocus our efforts in order to rebuild a more inclusive economy in a global economic system that currently presents significant external imbalances. So it's now essential to put specific, urgent, and here's the word, coordinated actions in place to prevent the current economic recession from turning into a real economic collapse in the months to come. And this is especially true in the countries and territories of the global south. Considering that the outlook remains uncertain due to the risks of new waves of contagion and the continued reduction of international trade, this cannot be ruled out. So the urgency and the main challenge faced by governments worldwide is the preservation of employment and the support of the most disadvantaged social layers working in the informal sector. It is also essential to ensure the continuity of the various economic activity, especially those with a strong social connotation, such as activities linked to solidarity and associative economy. How can we achieve this? How can the international cooperation help in overcoming this issue? We believe that the governance of the economic recovery must be carried out within the framework of exemplary cooperation between the various levels of governance, in particular, the intermediate level, which is key for the transformation of the vision of sustainable development of the territories into concrete actions having direct and positive impacts on citizens. The effectiveness of the response to the current crisis or any other crisis that matter that we face together, global territorial actors, as well as the broad and active participation of civil society and citizens. We must act together, involving all actors and levels of governance. What we have seen in the current COVID-19 health crisis is that despite the rise in some cases of an authoritarian or centralized discourse in the management and effects of this pandemic, we have seen how those who have succeeded in stemming the crisis best are primarily democratic territories where different levels of governance cooperate and where local and regional actors close to the citizens have an important role in managing the pandemic and the economic recovery in all its aspects. The report drawn up by the Global Task Force within the framework of the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the UN constitute a new opportunity to reiterate our commitment as regional governments to make the regional dimension an essential step for the integration of public policies and in the future multilateral community. And with this report, we really urge national governments to take regions and local governments into account in the multilateral arena, to work together in cooperation for the realization and implementation of adequate solutions to all the challenges of governance and sustainable development, which place the citizen at the heart of their concerns. Thank you for your time, Emilia. Thank you so much, everyone.
No, thank you very much, Miquel, also for the very active contributions that both Orofogar and yourself have provided to the reports. It has been a long road to try and introduce the territorial dimension and the subnational and regional dimension to our work with the United Nations. A very clear call for this coordination indeed. And we are going back to Africa now, but it could be anywhere. I mean, he's a global citizen, the founder and executive director of the African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes, Bassou Hounden. He's with us because he has been helping us think and work with the Global Task Force to bring this peace dimension also to our agenda. He also is very keen to avoid dichotomies and false discourses and help us think through Citopia. I hope you are going to talk about that today, Bassou.
Yes, thank you very much, Emilia. Undersecretary General, members of the regional and local governments, when looking at international cooperation and the UN we need, you will recall a year ago here in Durban, the city that I'm sitting in right now, at the UCLG conference, we announced that we will convene 75 intergenerational dialogues across the world to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. And together with the UN 75, represented by the Undersecretary General and UCLG, as well as other partners, we are happy to indicate that as of last week, we convened 75 intergenerational dialogues across the world to strengthen multilateralism. In those dialogues, we heard the same issues articulated that the UN Secretary General reported in his report as the top 10 findings, the most immediate priority being healthcare, safe water and sanitation, and education, services provided by both national governments and local governments, but mainly local governments. The top 10 priorities also indicated that 87% of those surveyed believe international cooperation is vital to deal with today's challenges, and 74% see the UN as essential in tackling global challenges. However, at the same time, over half still see the UN as remote from their lives, and they say they don't know much about it. Cities, of course, will bring them closer to the UN. And then, of course, participants indicated that dialogues also called for the UN to innovate in other ways. And I want to say today, Emilia, if we look at the statistics in 2045, when the United Nations will be 100, 96 member states of the United Nations out of the 200 odd will have populations of over 10 million people. But at the same time, in 2045, 41 megacities will have populations of over 10 million people. And of course, as I indicated in the last forum, if we don't resolve the problems and challenges of the world, we won't have utopias. We may go towards dystopias, but we want to actually inculcate what I call citopias, centers of cooperation and tolerance. And I want to be bold to say today, Emilia, that if we think about 41 megacities having populations of over 10 million and only 96 governments at that time having populations of over 10 million, we should be thinking, and I think it is time under Secretary General, because I know you are making notes for the Secretary General now, I think it is time that we also begin to look, like governments have first chambers and second chambers, that at the United Nations level, we should be thinking of a second chamber along the United Nations General Assembly, what I call a United Nations local government General Assembly. I think that it is time we started thinking about it, and before 2045, we should have a General Assembly of member states and a General Assembly of local government. Thank you, Emilia.
Thank you very much, Vasu. In fact, the Global Task Force convenes the World Assembly of Local and Regional Governments. It's just that they don't let us in that second chamber. But we have been already progressing on that job. So so I hope we are listened to. But in any case, we will not wait around. We will convene it anyway, and hopefully the Secretariat of the United Nations will accompany us, because the United Nations is more than the Secretariat. So we need to charm the system as a whole. Allow me now to go to Thembisile Nangdime, Mayor of Polokwane and President of the South African Local Government Association. The floor is yours, madam. You are muted again.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's Dear Excellencies, the Undersecretary General, Executive Director of the UN Habitat, dear mayors, presidents of the regional governments, and dear members of the Global Task Force and colleagues, good evening. Middle of a very challenging time that we are gathered here to commend the 75 years of the United Nations, as well as the findings of the report that have been commissioned by the UN Secretary General. The key findings of the report are very clear. The immediate priorities of our communities are to be able to enjoy full access to the benefit services that are now more than ever have proven to be essential to a fulfilling life in our cities and territories. This pandemic has also underlined how we local and regional governments play an essential role, and have done so even more during the pandemic in raising awareness and maintaining the functionality of basic services provision. Cities and regions from all over the world have, through these basic services, worked to ensure equal access and protected those public servants that deliver them. The pandemic has also shown, as our report points out, as many of my colleagues have already stated, that the inequalities that our communities face cannot be ignored. Equality, and more specifically gender equality, needs to be put at the heart of the development processes in order to guarantee that decision-making is done conscientiously. Involving women means involving all of the population. And this is an important takeaway that we need to consider when shaping the decisions that will affect all of humanity. The status of women, the specific needs, and the unique contributions that make to shape the future of humanity cannot remain invisible. In the post-COVID era, and to achieve the world that our most communities want, we need to include women and their voices in both the formulation and monitoring of public policies, and especially those that belong to populations that have been historically discriminated against. Women, as we all know, have seen during the pandemic at the forefront of care workers, and it is critical that we acknowledge them by developing an equality framework in urban planning, in legislation, and development. Time has come to ensure full inclusion, full participation of women and girls in politics and in the social fabric of cities and regions. The findings of our report also show yet another crucial fact for the future. Our communities are ready for a more inclusive multilateral system, for a world that includes all of the population in the decision that will affect them, for a world that does not leave a woman, the youth, or the more vulnerable behind. Dear friends, as the constituency of the local and regional government, we also need to listen and go back to our regions by protecting and promoting the voices of our communities through a strong local democracy, by being faithful to the values and principles of decentralization, subsidiary, and responsibility. International cooperation will always be essential for the recovery and further to achieve the universal development agenda that we agreed upon. As an equality-driven movement, we are actively involved in generation equality. The achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal 5 is critical, and the local and territorial leadership is key to make this world that we yearn for a reality. In conclusion, local and regional governments are aware that the only way forward is via co-creation with our communities and local actors, including the private sector, and with full collaboration between different spheres of government. It is therefore essential to carry out a holistic approach to the emergencies that we are facing and will face in the future, and said approaches must not adversely affect individual and collective rights and become the backbone of democracies. We, and I am convinced that the strong multilateral governance system and a new collaborative governance culture that can guide the steps in the interconnected realities is necessary. Thank you very much, colleagues, and thank you very much, Emilia, for the time.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for this. And I am going now back to Vice Mayor of UFA. Let us see whether. Thank you very much for your patience, Madam. I am crossing my fingers and hoping interpretation will work. Vice Mayor, the floor is yours.
Today, the number of global problems in the world is only growing, and their solution requires consolidation of efforts at all levels. In order to achieve a sustainable future, my colleagues from Eurasia and I have considered it necessary to create a new model of global governance where local authorities are actively involved in the global decision-making process. Global agreements and agendas should be formed in partnership with local authorities. During the meeting of mayors of the UCLG Eurasian section, there was made a proposal to include a new body consisting of representatives of local and regional authorities in the UN structure, and it was fully supported. It may be, for example, the Chamber of Local and Regional Authorities under the UN General Assembly. Now I would like to express the common position of the Eurasian section. It is necessary to expand funding for the activities of local authorities. We believe that to do this, it is necessary to set minimum standards for local authorities budgeting at the international level. I also want to focus on the process of digitalization and the introduction of modern technologies in the management process, which today becomes very effective. We need to facilitate the exchange of experience and allow people to be involved in the management process. In Nufa, one of these tools is the official website of the city, where interactive information maps allow direct communication with the residents and solving their problems. And the port entrepreneurship and investment promotes open interaction between government and businesses. In conclusion, dear colleagues, I'm happy to take this opportunity to invite you to the 6th World Folklore Festival, which will be hosted by UFA and the Republic of Bashkortostan, which I represent, in July next year. Also in September 2021, our city will be hosting the International Congress on Beekeeping called Apimondia, where you will get a chance to taste the famous fragrant Bashkir honey, which has no counterparts in the world. And now I would like to thank you for your attention on this note. So thank you very much for your attention again.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. It took a while, but we've got your concrete proposals, and thank you for these inputs. We are going now to, and this will be the last input from our side, and then I will give the floor over to the Undersecretary General to do closing remarks from his side. We've got a video from the Mayor of Bonn and President of ICLEI with some concrete proposals on how the Global Task Force could contribute.
On behalf of ICLEI, a network of over 1,750 local governments for sustainability and focal point to the LGMA constituency. The United Nations is celebrating its 75th anniversary in the shadow of a global pandemic, of serious challenges to multilateralism and life-threatening climate and biodiversity emergencies. ICLEI has committed to accelerating the localization of the UN Decade for Sustainability Action. We ICLEI leaders support the call of the United Nations Secretary General for a new era of inclusive multilateralism. Our blueprint is based on 4 cornerstones. First, annual high-level consultations with UN chief executives. ICLEI suggests an annual dialogue between the Global Task Force and the UN Sustainable Development Group, all leaders of UN assemblies and multilateral environment agreements. This dialogue should be held under the auspices of the UNSG and would provide much-needed synchronization and strategic guidance. Second, collaboration of UN regional commissions and UN host cities. The implementation of global agendas is regularly monitored, evaluated, reviewed, and customized according to regional priorities. The networks of local and regional governments should increase their participation at discussions led by the UN regional commissions. UN host cities have the potential to play a more active role as facilitators in this dialogue, if resourced accordingly. I'm speaking out of experience as mayor of a UN city here. Third, engagement with UN resident coordinators. With the UN development reform, the mandate of the UN resident coordinators has been expanded. ICLEI invites them to enhance engagement with national associations, networks of local and regional governments, as well as with the local 2030 hubs. Fourth, championing local and regional engagement. Local and regional governments are visible at UN events. Members of local and regional councils, senates and parliaments should have to link their engagement to their own strategies and implementation. This would ensure global awareness and political buy-in for long-term sustainability policies, commitments and initiatives. It is now time to take the spirit of UN 75 and shape an action plan. ICLEI stands ready to work with the Global Task Force and the UN towards this end. Let me close with inviting all of you on behalf of ICLEI and Bonn to join the debates at daringcities.org during Urban October.
So thank you very much. We thought we would break the rule of the pre-recorded messages because we know the mayor is hosting these Daring Cities, which is part of our Urban October celebrations. We just celebrated Metropolitan Day also with Metropolis very successfully, and the mayor is bringing very concrete proposals on how we could work. I think, Fabrizio, we have given you a kind of a menu of the way that we are looking at improving our relations with the system, with the Secretariat. So some remarks from your side to see how you look at these proposals and how you think maybe national governments will perceive them. The floor is yours, Undersecretary.
Thank you, Emilia. And I'd like to thank all for sharing these very inspiring and insightful remarks. I've taken careful note, my colleagues have taken careful note, and all this will be worked into our final report. I also have to thank Vasu, who from the very beginning of this project has been an exceptional partner and great in getting dialogues off the ground. And I share his view that while so much about the future is uncertain, and that level of uncertainty has only been highlighted and exacerbated by COVID, the one trend I think we can be sure of is this trend towards ever more urbanization and ever larger cities. And we need to see the world afresh through those eyes. You know, the member states, in parallel to our initiative to bring to their attention voices of we the peoples, member states adopted a declaration centered around the challenges of our times, and it very much reflects the challenges that have come out in this debate. But they also tasked the Secretary General with a follow-up of forging a new common approach to multilateralism, a new approach to tackling the challenges of our time. And they called on him to upgrade, that's the verb they use, our institution and to innovate and breathe new life into it. And I think he will now be starting a separate consultation process. And I think UCLG, the voice of UCLG, the voice of mayors, the voice of local authorities will be key in that. And part of the aim is that he will be coming back to the General Assembly early next year or mid next year with proposals on how to make the UN more inclusive. And I think some of the ideas that have been put forward here and that we will certainly carry to the Secretary General about having better dialogue and a more formalized dialogue between local authorities and the United Nations are ideas that could be integrated in the proposal, and that would be a very concrete way forward. So I think this work is the beginning of a process of innovation of multilateralism. There's no question that people want more multilateralism, but they don't want more of the same. They want something much more inclusive, much more effective. And I don't think we can get any better advisors in that than mayors who are at the cutting edge of so many challenges of our time. So thank you so much to all of you. And I hope we can use this process to strengthen our cooperation to build a better future for all those who we serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary General. Also, thank you, Executive Director of UN Habitat. I think she just parted because she had to go to another meeting. Thank you, colleagues, Secretary Generals of all the organizations that are gathered in the global task force. We are at your service, Undersecretary General. Let us think together how we can continue the process, how we can enhance this dialogue. As shared with you, we are convening the World Assembly of Local and Regional Governments, which is acknowledged in the outcome document of the Habitat 3 as a mechanism to monitor the implementation of the new urban agenda. So we are looking in ways in which we can enrich that process. And we would like to also congratulate UN Habitat for the excellent work that is doing, safeguarding the implementation of SDG 11 and for the new platform that they have put together. So all in all, a lot of food for thought, a lot of new tools. I think we are innovating in the tools. I do see progress, colleagues. I don't see all of your faces, but I hope you agree with me. We are making progress. So thank you very much for this session. I'm sorry we don't have much time, but if there is any emergency, if anybody wants to say anything, just raise your hand and I will make sure that your voice is heard. No? Everybody feels that we have covered? Well, we will be meeting again very soon, I am sure.
Okay, thank you for your effort, Emilia, and all participants with you. Thanks
thank
to
you.
Everyone. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very
everybody.
much.
Muchas gracias.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Emilia. Thanks.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre.
Bye, Emilia.
Bye. Oh, Maimuna, you were here.
Yes.
Bye.
Gracias,
I thought you
Emilia.
left.
Ha estado muy bien.